I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar. This is the part 3 of our sales leadership series brought to you by Renewed and John Hitchcock for putting this together. Thank you very much. This is named Sales Team Structure and Compensation. We have some very nice guests and speakers for you today. So my name is Joseph Coleman. I'm the Executive Director, and I'll be your host for today's event. If you have any questions for today's speakers, you can submit them through the chat function. You can email me, joseph@renewed.com. I'll be watching that. And after the presentation, you'll have access to the recording and all the slides. We have 2 very good slide presentations from Stephanie and Sheran at renewed.net/resources, and the recording will be posted probably tomorrow morning. You'll receive an email once it's posted as well. So after the presentation, we also encourage you to invite your colleagues and contacts who would benefit from Renewed's free online community. And you can go to renew.net to see all the member benefits. Now I'd like to welcome our speakers. I'd like to introduce our moderator, John Hitchcock. He's the Vice President, Managing Director of Energy Intelligence, a media executive with experience in editorial, sales, marketing, general management, encompassing digital and print and spanning newspapers, newswires, newsletters, and magazines across 5 continents. John, welcome speakers, and I'll let you take it away. Have a great show.
Thank you, Joseph. And before we get into this, I'd like to thank Joseph, especially because while the rest of us are joining this call, well, perhaps with 1 or 2 other West Coast exceptions, at a decent hour, 10 a.m. here on the East Coast of the United States, Joseph was up at 5:30 this morning, preparing 5:30 a.m. his time, preparing to get this underway. And he does that, if not every day, more days of the week than I'd like to imagine. So Joseph,
well, we have a 6-year-old in the house, so it's I'm up already. So yeah, I love to be here with you fine folks. So.
Yeah, well, there is that grace. So if you can put that 6-year-old to use, that's good for you. But as Joseph mentioned, this is the 3rd of 3-part series. Part 1 back in December before the holidays taught us about the virtues of knowing our customer. We started off the new year 2 weeks ago with a presentation, a roundtable on getting us to understand how best to engage the clients and prospects that we call our audience. Well, what happens after you know your customer, you've engaged that customer? Now, well, Sheran Fernando, the Chief Operating Officer of Warren Communications, and Stephanie Williford, Chief Executive Officer of EB Medicine, and our very own co-chair of Renewed, will tackle the thorniest part of the thorniest issues, which have to do with how to organize that sales team that's going to go get you that business, how to manage them, motivate the sales team, whether that team is a single individual working from home or a dozen people working in offices across the world. We have that breadth of experience. Stephanie, as she'll explain in a moment, works at a company that has a very small sales staff. Sheran, not so much. His staff is larger. There are lots of issues in common and some very special issues that we need to tackle depending on which end of the spectrum you're at. But if you get these issues right, the structure, the compensation right, you can supercharge performance. You get it wrong, and you wind up with a deflating, overstretched targets that just keep your sales team from doing what you want them to do. So before we get into the meat of this, let me start with a poll. I'm going to ask each of you to respond to the question, how large is your sales team? So we can give our presenters some idea of what stretch of the audience, what kind of stretch we have in this audience. The poll will ask, do you have any sales team at all? No sales team? A sales team of no more than 3 people? Or a sales team larger than 3? Joseph, you want to run the poll?
I apologize, John. We're having technical difficulties with the poll question. Okay. But let me try to...
We can use the chat as a response. So if you have no sales team, 3 or a sales team of 1 to 3 or more than 3, just pop the answer in the chat, and that'll just give us an idea of the size, so we can tailor some of the discussion around that.
Great. Here they come. I can see them.
Thank
Looks
you
like
guys
we've
for
got a
doing
pretty good mix,
Yeah.
so.
And Sue Stevens has half a person. Now, where that other half person has gone to, I don't know. But no sales team for Laura Stanford. That's great. I mean, I say that's great, not perhaps that may not be great for you. You may not want to be stuck in that circumstance, but it's great to have that part of our range. Anybody else want to answer before we get going?
I see several that have larger teams than I do, so hopefully you guys get some useful takeaways, and or you can share any insight in the chat, or as we go along too. If you have knowledge that would benefit the group, we welcome your input and challenging on any insights that we share.
That's right, Stephanie. The what I'd like to suggest is let Stephanie and Sheran answer a couple of questions I pose, and then tee up questions of your own. We'll deal with the sort of the more formal part of the presentation in the first 25 minutes, and in the last 25 minutes that we have, we'll open it up to questions from all of you and respond to your comments and concerns. So let's start with our first question to the panelists. This one, Stephanie, why don't you begin? I'll ask you to just simply describe your company. What do you produce? How long have you been producing it? And how many employees do you have? Do you have a half salesperson, or is there a whole salesperson somewhere in your organization?
All of the above in various capacities. To save you guys from having to take notes, I just kind of jotted some of this down. Are you all able to see my PowerPoint slides?
Loud and clear.
Awesome. Okay. So yeah, EB Medicine, we've been around since 1999. Our mission is to help empower acute care clinicians with evidence-based content to inform their clinical practice. We started in emergency medicine, and a short 22 years later launched into a new specialty of urgent care, which has really just blown up our business. It's all subscription-based content, no advertising, sponsorship, live events, primarily to what we call journals, but the old school term would be newsletter, but I'm not allowed to call them that, or our editors get very upset because they are much different type of format. We actually still have a couple of them in print, but all of our newer content and everything in urgent care is online. We do have some ancillary resources, courses, that sort of thing. So just to give you an idea of what we're selling, we have a pretty small team, 17 employees, a lot of independent contractors. All of our subject matter experts and content creators are physicians or clinicians practicing in the specialties that we're writing about. So those are all contractors. And then we use a lot of support staff that are or support resources as well. We have historically been direct response. When we launched, back in the mail, way back in the day. That was our primary method of driving revenue. Then obviously email marketing and website now are our biggest channels. Until about 7 years ago or so, when we started focusing more on selling subscriptions to larger, or to groups, as opposed to direct to the physicians that were consuming the content. And that just kind of put down our revenue mix in terms of individual subscriptions versus group subscriptions, new versus renewal. So 70% for individuals versus groups is 30%. That's grown significantly since we've been building this up over the last few years. And then obviously renewals, a significant portion of our business at 55% of our revenue. And our new market currently, the urgent care market that we launched 2 years ago, is 20% of our revenue. So that's just kind of us in a nutshell. John, did you want me to go ahead and go in a little bit more on sales team structure as well? Or is this helpful as a starting point?
We'll have a follow-up question on that shortly. I just wanted to give Sheran a chance to describe his company too, and so you get a sense of Stephanie being on the smaller end of the spectrum of companies in terms of employees. Not in terms of importance, for sure. You talk about getting into the land of urgent care in the middle of the pandemic. That's a story in itself. But Sheran, Warren Communications, can you give us an idea of what you're all about and how long you've been about it and what your staff looks like?
Sure. Thank you, John. The company, Warren Communications News, has been around since 1961. And it's a family-owned business now with a third generation of ownership involved in the business. The main areas of focus are on regulatory compliance in different markets. One, our legacy is really in telecom regulation, and we have probably the dominant information service in that space, which is called Communications Daily. Following an acquisition back in 2012, we got into trade compliance, and we have since done some successful product development that has built that business quite nicely. As far as the price points and such, by the way, all of this is covered in the leave behind material that Joseph will share later on. So I won't belabor it, but the sales side of this evolved really out of necessity some 25 years ago when direct marketing started to fail as a revenue source. And so we have since developed a B2B inside sales organization that's organized on a territory basis. We typically have a minimum of 6 and as many as 7 people. It's the revenue driver for the entire business. We don't do channel management in the conventional sense. We feed everything to the sales organization, including customer service. So it's an end-to-end kind of approach to dealing with a relationship-based structure. And we organize on the basis of sales territories geographically. As things have grown, we've had to consider adapting that to perhaps product lines, but we haven't done that yet. We are blessed with very high renewal rates, and licensing is a major part of what we do in terms of generating our revenue.
Great. Well, thanks very much for going through that, Sheran, and I think you've given people a bit of a sense of the structure that you have. How has that structure changed in the last just say even the last 4 years since the pandemic struck, or did the pandemic have any effect on how you tried to organize your sales team?
Well, we were among those for whom the pandemic became an opportunity, and I think that was thanks to the content we provide. Many of our clients, who are typically law firms, major corporations, kind of executive level people, all went remote, as did we on day one. And now suddenly, particularly from a standpoint of copyright compliance, they required the information that they were getting by other means in the office, at their home locations and otherwise. So we saw significant growth during the pandemic, starting almost immediately, even though we had no idea whether we were going to be in business a year hence from March 2020. But that really worked out well. We did not change organizationally, other than from being in a 100% in-office environment for the sales team, we went 100% remote. We did things on day 2, which we do today, such as requiring a morning Teams call for the whole team. It's probably a 15 to 30-minute discussion every day. It's a major time commitment for me and for the director of sales in terms of what it takes to do that, but it's been essential in terms of how it's kept folks together and maintain morale and communication and management and everything else that goes with that. So the pandemic itself was more of an opportunity than it was anything else for us. I know it's not been the case for all publishers, and we had no idea what was going to happen as we went into it.
Good. Well, it was a Pandora's box for sure. Stephanie, you mentioned that again that you in 2022 you launched into urgent care in addition to emergency room journals that you've been publishing for years. How did that change your sales staff's structure? What was it before that, and what is it today, or rather your approach to sales, I should say? How has that changed over the last 4 or 5 years?
It's changed a lot, so I kept getting it wrong. We hired our first salesperson in 2017, stole her from a competitor, probably one of the best decisions I've ever made. And she really has, run the whole thing, really, or done the whole thing, new and renewal sales. I've learned a lot from my renewed friends over the years, and tried several times to have a hunter and a farmer, and just could never find a hunter that could do it better than she did, or at all. So we currently have, she's still with us. She now is handling all of our new and renewal sales for large groups. Last year we added, I should have put part-time salesperson in quotes for this too, because she's full-time, but also does customer service and has been doing like appointment setting and sales outreach for us. So that's why she's a full-time person, but sales is not her only job. And she's now taken on small groups as well. And that was somebody that was promoted internally. Once we started talking about adding another role, she raised her hand and said, "I want this," and has done a really fantastic job. I don't know why I have a typo here. Our other part-time sales support person that we added last year what that's supposed to say is an industry expert. So he's actually a physician and the creator of one of our courses. And he goes out and makes calls and emails and everything to generate leads for us. So kind of an atypical approach, but has worked really well and given us a lot of credibility on our sales calls, because he can actually talk shop with them. And then I put part-time sales manager in quote, because that's me. And again, obviously I'm full-time, but I don't even know how many hats. So I don't get to focus as much as I would like on sales, but fortunately, because I have such a strong team, they're really able to support each other. We did go remote in 2020. We were part-time remote before that. Everybody worked 2 days a week from home anyway. So that was a pretty easy transition for us. And then we just haven't gone back. And one of as with Sheran, it presented an opportunity for us, but in kind of a weird way. Everybody learned how to use Zoom, which was great, because we could get physicians to actually show up on calls and talk to us face to face, which before it was on the phone and you just don't have that same, ability to see their reaction and have good conversations. So that was kind of an interesting shift, being able to get on video calls and do presentations and all of that. And then obviously it was a huge driver of the urgent care market. I think if we had tried to launch prior to 2020 in urgent care, it would not have been the same opportunity, because there was just so much change in the market, such a huge increase in hiring, and a big change in hiring clinicians that were less trained. So more PAs and NPs, and that's really what drove that new product launch. There have been challenges working remote, and I think one of the biggest downsides of it is that we can't sit in a room together, and particularly for our newer salespeople, you don't get to hear those conversations. We do try to include as much as possible, 2 people on each sales call, so we can learn from each other, support each other. But you miss out on that. Somebody just picks up the phone and calls you. You're not sitting side by side. You don't get to chat as often in the hallway. But we have a heavy reliance on Teams. I mean, we have a sales team chat, and every single day that's, we're constantly sharing, resources or questions and supporting each other that way. I think if I tried to make them do a daily meeting, they would revolt. I often get requested to cancel the weekly one, but I do try to maintain that too. To really keep everybody together, to share what's working, to discuss challenges. I also meet one-on-one with each of my salespeople each week, and to go over KPIs. And then one of the things that I have done, and I 100% stole this from Mike Weinberg, who I cannot recommend highly enough for sales training, both for staff and for management, is a monthly accountability meeting. And if you go to his website, the first thing you'll see is a pop-up to download his little white paper on it, and he walks through exactly how to do it. And he will tell you that's the single most important driver of success. And really it is just focusing on results and pipeline. So I rely a lot on external training because I'm not a salesperson by background, or a sales manager by background. So I definitely look for good resources and pretty regularly share those, whether it's a one-off webinar or an ongoing course or an in-person course. That is a big part of our kind of ongoing training and support and everything.
Yeah, that's a really critical question. I'd love to come back and talk more about the kind of how you maintain training standards and culture as workforces go remote, even if remote is just down the hall. Before doing that, though, Sheran, can we dive a little bit further into your structure? I mean, you went over it a little
Sure.
bit, but how is it segmented? Are they, they're in the office, but I guess that means everyone is in a central office, or do you have multiple offices across the country or across the world, for that matter? Within that segmentation, are products segmented? Are responsibilities? You said customer service is part of the sales staff's responsibility. Are there dedicated customer service individuals, or does that fall onto on everyone's plate?
We are 100% remote, and to the extent of actually selling the office building that we own, that will happen in the next 3 months or so. So all the sales team is home based at this point, because the years of the pandemic have shown that we could make it work. The slide that's up there now is really about how we got here, more so than where we are at the moment. As I mentioned before, direct selling was the focus, and with inside sales, we wanted to really emphasize relationship management, which kind of infuses everything that we do. Our customer base has been with us a long time. We have very high renewal rates. And so it only made sense that to maximize revenue and licensing opportunities and all the rest of it, that it was the most logical way for us to proceed. So that is how we went about doing what we did in organizing this. We have never wavered from that. There have been certain tweaks and changes along the way. We'll talk about when we get to compensation. The marketing function is 100% for the support of the sales process, and everything feeds to sales. We do not attempt to generate revenue directly from marketing channels, and we don't much care about the cost side of things when it comes to commissioning the sales team. We found along the way that trying to parse between what is commissionable and what is not commissionable is a bit of a fool's errand, that you spend as much time on that as you do on actually generating the sale, and that you want everybody pulling on the rope at the same time. So we don't have some of the conflicts that I've experienced in the past, where marketing and sales are not in sync. Partly because of this channel management issue. So that has been something that has helped, I think, a great deal. There's many things we do would not be conventional. If you go back to sort of the Glengarry, Glenn Ross type of stereotypes of sales and sales management, we're not into any of that. We don't have an adversarial relationship with our sales team. We look to have reasons to keep salespeople around, as opposed to find reasons to let them go. The old thing about setting goals, failing to meet goals, being put on performance improvement plans, this kind of thing. It's not that we haven't had performance failures, because we have, but we know when that is happening, and we don't make that sort of an intrinsic aspect of who we are and how we do things. It's a much more long-range type of mindset oriented to this relationship building. And we have people who've been here selling for 25 years. The average tenure with us is probably, at this point, I would say about 15 on average across the full sales team. So there's a lot of inbuilt knowledge there, as well as client relationships, which are intangibles when it comes to being able to be successful. We deal with high-level people. Our people themselves have to be able to communicate both in writing and on the phone and in video calls at a level that's commensurate with dealing with partners at major law firms and top corporate execs and people like that. We hire to that profile. You see that in the bottom bullet there. The communication skills are paramount, as is the organizational aspect.
So it sounds like if people have been around an average of 15 years, training and keeping the culture alive, whether you go remote or stay in an office, or whether you're across offices in several locations, is not an issue for Warren. Is that fair?
It's kind of inherent to how we do things. I mean, we have tried to be as transparent as possible and as flat as possible in dealing with the sales team. That is, we have an expectation that sales team members conduct training sessions once a month for the whole group. They vet a topic with the director of sales. They do some prep work. They sometimes do a show and tell before the session, but then they conduct a collaborative sales training session on a monthly basis, and that rotates. In addition, we have used an outside training organization called Integrity Selling, whose principles worked very well with the kinds of things we already were doing, but put it into a framework that was consumable. We were lucky in that all these things had been set up well ahead of the pandemic. We have not had to do too many adaptive things other than the 100% remote working environment as a consequence of the pandemic. So there was a lot of continuity. There was when it came to training and such, and it's really been part and parcel of kind of how we do business every day.
Mhm.
We can't overstress internal communication, particularly in these remote or hybrid environments, so that salespeople don't feel like they're stuck out there on an island by themselves and have opportunities, in effect, to flounder. That we want the thrust to be the identification of problems, the resolution of problems, brainstorming. We wear out our Teams license. That is, video calling is a multiple times a day activity in terms of staying ahead of the sales process.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So your executive team is quite involved in the every step, it sounds like, or anyway, key steps of the sales.
Yes. Before I started working with Warren, I consulted with a number of at that time SIPA and Newsletter Association members on establishing their sales organization. And the one thing that I always emphasized was that this had to come top down. This wasn't an experiment, that if you're going to get into this, you needed to be serious about it and understand what the commitment was to see it succeed. Organizations that adopted that mentality would succeed, and for those for whom it was more of a test or just something to dabble with, usually didn't. And so that's been part and parcel of this at Warren. It was kind of not a matter of choice, because the direct marketing side of things was failing so poorly that there was no choice but to go all in on making this work as a replacement. And obviously it has since then. We do virtually no traditional direct marketing anymore because we can't find an ROI in it, even factoring in how we interact with the sales team. It created a lot of change issues inside the company. You had people who were essentially direct mail processors on the circulation management side who now had to start thinking differently. There was staff turnover that happened as a result of that because people would not adapt or could not adapt. But the team that is there right now operates within the culture you were talking about, John. for sales success being sort of the paramount driver. When we get to compensation, I'll talk about what the salespeople make, but they're the highest paid people in the company, short of the executive group.
Yeah, well, as a junior reporter at my first real job, I was told by a rather elderly, very established editor, the sales guys, they're the ones who make the money. They're the ones whose lives are on the line. The rest of us just kind of follow along. From the editorial shop, that's always been the case. The journalists don't get paid an awful lot. The sales guys, if they're successful sales guys, certainly should. But that's should, as in should if they're successful. Stephanie, let's get into compensation issues at your house, if we would. How are the various salespeople compensated? You mentioned a guy who's a physician who's part of your sales team, and you've got people who are much more junior in terms of their livelihoods and skill bases. I'm sure. How does compensation? How is that set up for you at EB? Base versus commissions, renewals versus renewals and retaining business versus new products, focuses on new products versus gathering in business from old products and old clients. Have at it, please.
It's almost like I knew you were going to ask that question. So this is a little bit of an overview of our sales comp, and I'll say this applies to my 2 staff salespeople. The outlier that I have, that's like our physician industry expert, he's compensated differently. It's actually a revenue share on the portion of the sales that are from the product that he created. And then he actually doesn't get a commission or incentive or anything for the sales that he contributes to for our other products. And then he has a monthly stipend as well. So that he's an outlier. Again, we have this kind of funky structure. Happy to talk more with anybody directly that has questions about it specifically that would offline if that's helpful. But so for our 2 internal salespeople, we set goals at the beginning of the year. It's interesting hearing Sheran's perspective on this. So the reason that we started to try to grow the group subscription business and build the sales team was not because we were struggling with direct response, but more because we wanted bigger checks. It's great to get a $5,000 check instead of a $500 check. And also we realized that the retention on our groups was a lot higher. There's a lot that we maybe on first year conversions, honestly, could be as low as 45% for some of our subscription products for individual subscription sales, and then around 65% for third and beyond. Whereas for our group subscription sales, we were seeing 85+% renewal rate. So once we get them, they stuck around. So that was really a big driver of why we transitioned. And as I mentioned earlier, we still are the larger percentage of our revenue does still come from individual subscription sales, which is driven by our marketing team. That has worked really well for us. We haven't had issues in terms of it being, adversarial or competitive with is this an individual sale or a group sale, because it's just very obvious. And that's been, I think, a very collaborative, well-working arrangement. We do commission differently based on new versus renewal and on upsells. I've heard a lot of debate about this, and I think there is an argument to be made for why would you not commission your renewals at the same, at least, or higher than your new, because it's cheaper to keep a customer than get a new one. But it's also less work to keep a customer. So that's kind of the side that we've erred on. And that's why we have renewals at a 4% commission compared to new at a 10%. And then we added a couple of years ago as what intended to be an incentive to go above and beyond the goal is 15% once you exceed the goal. Look, we put in a quota as kind of like a fail-safe, hedge your bets when we first started doing this, that if you don't at least get half of the goal, then you don't get commissioned on the sales. It's never happened. So that it hasn't been an issue, but it's kind of there as our way to cover our costs. So, Sheran mentioned not really factoring that in. I'm a little bit more risk averse, I guess. We're trying to, again, sort of hedge our bets on that, but it hasn't been an issue. Because again, we have a great team. And then in terms of how the actual like compensation for the sales team is, it's about 60% of their total comp is base salary and 40% on commission.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you don't have anything that is tantamount to a bonus or a something paid to sales staff for meeting a revenue target. It is commissions off of sales, not overall revenue.
Correct. Yes, for our sales team, and it is only on paid sales, which we have like almost 100% pay up rate. So that's not an issue, but it does, again, from a cash flow perspective, we're not paying it until we get paid, which is also an incentive for the sales team to hunt down the money. There's an argument to be made that they shouldn't be wasting time doing that. But we found it to be pretty effective, and it works well for us. Oh, you asked me about mix of new products or new markets versus existing ones. Currently, we're about 20% of our revenue is from new products. So we don't commission differently, to try to drive more new versus existing products or markets.
Okay, so no goosing that part of things by upping the commission on something that you've just released to market. Good. Sheran, can you give us something the same from Warren?
Absolutely. So we come at this in terms of the overall compensation structure from the standpoint of cost of sale. And there we look to make it as fully loaded as possible, where it's 100% of sales salaries and commissions and benefits and the whole 9 yards, as well as 1/2 of the circulation and marketing functions, as well as a proportion of my compensation. With all of that, we're running a cost of sale that is under 30%, and that is a number that we are happy with. And the structure itself for the sales team breaks down from that. We have base salaries that range from $50,000 to $60,000. Total comp is on average about $150,000 a year for the sales team members. The commission structure itself is done at the account level. Renewals are baselined at 5% of base, but anything sold above that carries higher commissions depending on what exactly is done, whether there are actual upsells in terms of the numbers of eyeballs or seats, and so on. At our price point, we've learned that it's important to have varying price points at the point of sale for new sales. So we have commissions for brand new sales that range from 20% on the low end to as high as 40%. The higher the take in terms of the sale, the higher the commission. So when we have people doing what we want them to do, that commission kicks in. So if the sales rep has discretion as to where in that spectrum of pricing they will bring in a new customer at. Obviously, they are incentivized to go as high as possible. And so they are always looking for the maximum value of the sale because their compensation is directly tied to that. That has worked out very well in terms of a method. We do not have sales goals or bonuses. We run incentive programs, which are essentially by a month or a 3-month period for a particular focus, and it's usually oriented to new sales with various products that we're campaigning on at the moment. So that's sort of the rough order of things. And we have seen as revenue has grown, obviously the salespeople are making more money. We have a mindset, which is that we want the sales team to make as much money as possible within the cost of sale structure that we've established. And so it's, again, in not being adversarial, we from our CFO onward, everybody understands that the algorithm works. And so the more money that the sales team members are making, the better off the company is, and our bottom lines are better as a result. So that's really how we look at these things. Like with Stephanie, we also pay on net paid sales. Keeps things clean, and the sales team handles their own collections as well. We don't have any slow pay, no pay kind of problems really. But that bottom point on the slide, be generous within cost of sale metrics, is something as a mindset that has really worked out well for us and for the folks who are on our sales teams.
Mm-hmm. So whether it's a KPI or some other element of the compensation or some other element of the performance measures that you use with the sales guys, think back over the last several years. Has there been anything that you introduced that did not work and that you had to reverse, or conversely, something that you introduced relatively recently that just helped a lot in terms of
this variable commission structure for new sales was something that came in maybe at this point 6 or 7 years ago. Again, we were lucky that it came in before the pandemic and that we had thought it through, because otherwise it was a differentiated commission between new and renewal sales, but the new sales commission was flat. So the sales team would tend to find the easy way to a commission as opposed to maximizing the commission. So, I mean, for example, let's say it was 20% for a new sale versus 5%. That was easy then to take the lower end or the middle end of the pricing spectrum, as opposed to really striving to go for the highest level. Right now, the differences between a full price sale and a discounted sale are so gaudy that a salesperson really has to think long and hard about what they want to book with a given customer and how hard they want to work at it. And so that works out very well. I mean, we've seen a much higher rate of licensing at birth, that is for brand new customers coming in with multi-seat licenses, which in and of themselves carry a substantial price premium. So that's been one of the things that has really changed over time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And as with Stephanie, are your multi-seat licenses typically stickier? You have your renewal rates in terms of revenue much greater there than on single sales?
They are proximal. The big advantage of the license sales is that they never go to zero, almost. It's extremely rare that we'd have somebody come in with a license and say with 5 seats and then turn around and next year abandon the whole thing. They might have some pricing issue where they don't want to pay what they paid last year, but they'll reduce the number of seats and we retain the business, and things always change. I mean, we've seen things fluctuate that way, but for the most part, the stickiness is really in the fact that you don't see attrition to zero.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, and Stephanie, to you, that good old renewed question: what have you done that's not worked out so well, and what's kind of a recent success that you can think of introducing in terms of the prompts that you give to sales people's performance?
Well, the list of things I've done wrong is a lot more than I can cover in 15 minutes. But one of the challenges that we've had is getting inbound leads. So we've tried a number of things around that. Last year, the person that I mentioned that we promoted from customer service, a big part of her initial role was a sales outreach and appointment setting. And we were doing LinkedIn and emailing, and we were really struggling to get traction on that. We set that model up with, there was an incentive for each scheduled appointment, and then a small percentage of the commission based on if the sales closed. We really really struggled to get that to work and have found it to be a lot more effective with this physician that we have of him doing the outreach. You know, it's peer-to-peer, and that just seems to be a lot more effective for us, which is part of why we've increased her role on doing more of the actual new and renewal sales for the smaller groups as opposed to this outreach method. We've also tried using marketing to generate inbound leads. So, you know, like a significant amount of emails, and we gave up on that a couple of years ago because it wasn't generating leads. We're going to try again this year because I don't know, I don't like to give up. So we'll see if it works. And we also are in a new market, so that we haven't tried any kind of significant outreach via marketing to generate inbound leads for urgent care. So we're going to give that a go. And one other thing that I thought was a brilliant idea but failed miserably was to hire somebody from the industry to do the sales. So we actually looked for an advanced practice clinician, so like a PA, thinking, okay, well, again, peer-to-peer, they'll do the outreach, they'll be able to talk shop. And I think the compensation structure on that was one of the biggest problems. Also, just not hiring somebody that was a true hunter was part of the issue too. He wasn't really aggressive enough, but the comp was probably the biggest issue because he just couldn't get beyond thinking about it as an hourly rate and calculating that, okay, I'm used to working, you know, if I work a shift in the urgent care, I get $85 an hour. And my base compensation at EB Medicine was like, I don't know, $30 an hour or something. Once you added on the commission, it would have gotten him over the 85, but he just like couldn't conceptualize that. So ultimately, I think we 6 months tried that, generated no sales, and moved on from that. So those are my three of my failed attempts at some things related to sales. But really, you know, what has worked very well, and I actually will give credit to Dan Fink for this, and how we've structured the pricing model for our for the urgent care market, as opposed to doing it on like a seat-based or per user license. We're actually charging per location in urgent care, and the idea is to encourage and incentivize them to get it for everybody, and to, you know, very much push it internally usage, which then makes it look better because they realize everybody's using the product, so the renewal rate is higher. And that has also made us look a lot cheaper than our competitor, but increase the total value of most of our orders. So it doesn't work on the emergency medicine side because they don't have a ton of locations. So that we are still pricing on like a per seat basis. But that's been an interesting model and an approach that has been pretty effective for us.
Yeah, so a true enterprise approach to the license as opposed to a named user in, you know, a set number of users at a location or across locations. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, and Dan is smack in the middle of this audience, so I'm sure his ears are red with the well-deserved praise that you've just given him. Sheran, I think you've touched on this, but if you could go over again your approach, site licenses or named individual licenses versus true enterprise licenses, where everybody at a shop can have access to what you're producing. Have you gone back and forth with that? Do you
we do both
enterprise licenses?
We do both, John. And the enterprise license is an aspirational outcome, and it's usually the end of a multi-year process of upgrading licenses over and over again. The enterprise licenses for us are six-figure deals. So that's obviously not a day one kind of outcome in a practical sense. So it's an evolved result. But we have numbers of them, and it's worked out well. Those are very sticky.
Yeah. Joseph, let me pause for just a second, because I've been running through my questions, much to my delight. I don't know whether the audience is being frustrated because it has audience questions that we want to throw to Stephanie and Sheran before we end up at the top of the hour.
We're clear, but if you do have questions, send them in the chat, and I'm monitoring my email, joseph@renew.net. So please submit them now.
Okay. Good. Well, we're waiting for people to pop up. Let me throw out one more question to both of you. What about technology? What platforms do you use to keep track of the sales team as well as your audience? Stephanie, in Salesforce or NetSuite or any of those mainline products, or is there something else that you've used to keep track of sales performance?
My partner who's in the other room is going to hate my answer to this question because he works on NetSuite and is a big believer in it. But for me, I feel like that's overkill. NetSuite and Salesforce, when we started with the sales team, we looked at a number of different platforms, CRMs for managing the leads and pipeline and all of that, and we ultimately went with a CRM that nobody has ever heard of called ClaritySoft. It's insanely cheap. I think we spend very little on it, certainly compared to Salesforce, and it didn't require an administrator, which was my big concern with any of the larger platforms, is that you needed somebody to run it. We did have our operations person that set it up when it was all very customizable, which is great because you can make it do whatever you want, and not great because you have to figure out all the things you want it to do in terms of your sales steps and what you want to call those steps and the process. And it doesn't really have automation built into it. It's not connected to our email marketing platform. We do send emails from it, although we've kind of realized recently that it works better if we use like our mass email marketing platform. So we use Drip as our email. So that's where kind of our mass email goes from. That's for the individual subscriptions, and what we'll use for lead gen as we kick that off this year. I think, I don't know, I haven't met anybody that's happy with their tech stack ever, but it works well enough. And we actually use Rike for project management. Our sales team works a lot more out of the CRM than that, but that's kind of our process for that. And we, as I mentioned, heavy reliance on Teams just for communication and sharing, documents and that sort of thing. And that's connected to our OneDrive and all of that. So I wouldn't say it's a fully integrated system, but it works and it's inexpensive. So that's where we're at now.
Good for you, because it is often just kind of an axiom that the you've got to spend a lot of time and a lot of money to get a big sales focused CRM in place, and then the salespeople don't use it. Terrible. Sheran, where do you come out on this? Folks have one in place?
Yeah, we actually have a proprietary system that we built. I mentioned we'd made an acquisition, and with that came a guy who was the developer of the CMS for that company. And he turned out to be so brilliant and capable that we switched our entire CMS to start with to the thing that he had built. And from that, he developed a CRM so that we have an integrated CRM and CMS system. And it is used extensively as the driver of the sales process. We use QuickFill for subscription accounting, the traditional subscription accounting function. The two things talk to each other in terms of the reporting out for accrual accounting and all the rest of it that we do. But from the transactional standpoint, we rely on this homemade platform of ours, which is working more than well enough for us at the point.
Good. So if you could think back of, we've covered an awful lot of ground in 55 minutes. And as we've come to a close, Stephanie and Sheran, I would want to just ask you, if you think back through all of what we've touched on, are there one or two things that you'd particularly like to highlight that perhaps have done you really good turns that you think are repeatable by folks outside your organizations? The customized stuff, things that you build yourself, are great, but are there things that perhaps you could recommend that really work for you, that are easily adaptable by others at other firms?
I don't know how easily adaptable it is or not, but for us, it's been the alignment of the internal and the external. That is the mindset of taking care of your people, not being adversarial with them so that they are not adversarial with your customers. That is kind of a intangible in a lot of ways, but it's been one of those things that has really paid off for our purposes. Sorry about that. That would be the thing that I would stress the most, is to really think through what kind of philosophy of sales organization and management that you want to have, regardless of whether you're running a small organization or a larger one.
Good. Stephanie?
I don't know how tangible this is either, and it seems like the answer that you hear in response to almost any question related to how to make a business successful, but it really does come down to hiring good people and people that really want to be here. I often say I don't actually care why they want to work at EB Medicine, whether it's you're passionate about, helping improve patient care, or you think publishing is really cool, or a women-owned business is really cool, or what. I really don't care what the reason is, just that there is one, that there is something that really makes you want to be here, because at the end of the day, that's what makes them put in the extra effort. We've tried to structure our compensation in a way that's very fair and rewarding, but I don't actually think that's the driver of why anybody works at EB Medicine. We do offer, I think, very good benefits, and try to have a really collaborative environment and culture. And I think that's a much bigger driver of, our success and what has worked really well for us. So, I did see a question come in the chat too. So happy to.
We could perhaps wrap this up with that question, which is a great one. I mean, enterprise licenses, they're the aspiration of us all. But how do you get growth from them once they're established? What do you mark the growth by? How do you push that from whatever price you've got today to something that's bigger the following year? Is it based on the number of accesses that people make, the number of hits, the number of IP addresses that are captured by your website as people come in and look at their material on an enterprise basis? How have you guys found driving prices of enterprise licenses up? What do you measure them by?
As I mentioned, the enterprise license for us is an evolved state, and so it's sort of the apex of the pyramid, if you will. So at that point, we rely really on annual price increases as a driver of additional revenue there, and we do try to be as aggressive as possible as to what those increases are. The disproportionate nature of enterprise license pricing for us keeps that whole, if you will. Regarding access, we don't limit seats, and we encourage mass usage within the spectrum of the applicability of the content.
Good. Stephanie, what about you and your enterprise licenses?
So definitely what Sheran said, price increases. We don't do contracts for all of our enterprise sales, only if they're $15,000 a year or higher, for various reasons. But those we do build in a 5% increase into, and then we try to go up by 5% every year, regardless. We do for the enterprise sales where we're selling seats, we do try to get them to add seats every year. For the urgent care, it's kind of baked in because they're adding new locations, because that market is just growing so quickly. And then also from trying to upsell them to other products. So in both the emergency medicine and the urgent care market, we have additional products that we're trying to get them to add on. So those are the main ways that we're getting the revenue per enterprise license up each year.
Good. Well, thank you for that. And thank you both for all of what you've delivered in the last 59 minutes now it is. Joseph, I think it's a wrap. If you want to finish up with your farewell.
Absolutely. Excellent job, guys. Thank you very much for joining. To the speakers, thank you for presenting. And I remind you that you should take our quick survey, and the resources will be posted at renew.net/resources. So I look forward to that recording. You can send it to your whole team. This concludes today's webinar. Thank you very much.